implications for the Ospreys losing players of this quality?
Oh, look, we're really disappointed for Rees. It's you know, the cusp of something special in his career, but he knows the protocols now, and unfortunately we move on. And I think in terms of this now, likewise commiserations to Rees. We've spoke to him, we'll back him, but you know, our focus and the focus now should be about discussing the game on Sunday. And you know, for us, the first home game, you know, it's a special occasion, being back at the Liberty, and you know, with a tribute to Jerry Collins, and hopefully a growing swell of support around this. I think it could be a magnificent occasion. So I'd like to go on from there, really.
Yeah, in terms of last weekend, obviously disappointing start. But what do you take from that game into the Munster game?
Not a lot positive. You know, we can't hide behind that performance. It was, you know, unacceptable. You know, we were rudderless, you know, on the back of obviously a good performance in pre-season, but that perhaps created a false impression of our preparation, and I don't know if we got carried away, but we suddenly, you know, went into our shells within the sort of environment over in the Kingspan, and that's to Ulster's credit, the way they pressured us, but we didn't react to it. We got individual. You could say we clearly lacked some physicality and energy and reactions, which is hugely disappointing and unusual from an Osprey side. Certainly in our time here, it's something we've rarely seen, if ever. So that's probably the most disappointing thing to take. But we've got to take on board some messages about how we can play smarter and actually try and stretch a defensive line differently, use our resources a little bit better, perhaps, you know, both from a manpower point of view in terms of forwards, but also it was a poor night from a backline clarity point of view. We lacked, you know, communication in terms of what we were doing, and again, even though we were on the back foot, there was opportunities we could have shared the load with forwards and, you know, moved the ball in different ways, but we neglected to do so. And again, that's unusual for us in the last couple of years.
Is that then just a night you draw a line in there and go back to what you have been doing last season and in pre-season, or is it more concerning? It's a bad night to be honest.
To a certain degree, yeah, you want to move on quickly, but they've had a full and frank review today, both individually, you know, players are culpable within the system, you know, we'll put our hand up also, but they've got to quickly problem solve around those defensive pictures, because, you know, they come thick and fast against, you know, all sides in this league are going to create those sort of problems, and if we attack the way we did, in terms of really playing to an opposition side's strengths, and then obviously giving away cheap possession and then some real passive defence, which again was unlike us. So, you know, there's not much to take from the game in a positive light, but you've got to use it as ammunition to put things right for this weekend, first and foremost, with a big game at the Liberty. You know, but the foundations of our game around this block with this group of players has got to be better.
So you actually came off with looked like a pretty serious injury. Is there any news on that game?
You know, it's clearly a significant lower limb injury. He'll see the surgeon this week, and we'll find out more by the end of the week, but there's no new news to report there.
It's fair to say it could be a lengthy layoff for him.
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
Any other injury concerns after last weekend?
Not overly, no. A few bumps and bruises and a few precautions not on the training field today, but, you know, mostly okay.
You saw quite a lot of some of the Wales boys on the bench, and some like Brendan Lennon on the bench last weekend. Are you expecting them to perhaps start this Sunday?
They certainly, you know, pressed their case. We've obviously got, you know, different physical athletes who came off the bench, and, you know, the way the game was panning out, we had a few phases of play where they did come to the fore, but it was in amongst some general malaise. But to be fair to Brendan as well, he's had a little cameo there where we're shapeless, we lack width because of a couple of the injuries, and then going with a 6-2 split meant we obviously had a back row in the middle, but he still managed to look pretty stylish and a threat around the base, so that's credit to him and his ability. Hopefully we can put him into a more structured team which is going forwards with far better platforms, and we can see him really flourish in this Osprey shirt.
How much of an impact has he made so far since coming in?
Yeah, good. He's just a good man who understands the game of rugby. He doesn't get too het up or too ahead of himself with certain things. I think there's a message there. Sometimes, you know, we Welsh folk can, you know, get pretty emotional. I see a lot of boys getting overly stressed last Friday night, which you can understand in the heat of the battle. But it's just also about being really clear with what comes next. You know, possibly it's a Kiwi trait, but actually, you know, we just move on to the next thing pretty quickly, and he displays that on a daily basis. And he's, you know, clearly good around the younger players with that sort of mindset, as well as lots of small intricacies to his role and the influence he can have.
In terms of Munster, obviously that defeat in Limerick's still fresh in the memory. Does that sort of part in the build up to this game?
I've spent all summer trying to forget that one, but no, it doesn't really. You know, in terms of this group of players, it's probably different. Same for Munster. It's a different stage of the competition, and for us, it's just becoming the first home game. We can't wait to play in front of the crowd, the Liberty. You know, the backing we tend to get them when they do get behind us makes us such a significant difference. And you know, for us, then it is about putting clearly a better performance than last weekend. Anything less would be unacceptable again. So we've got to seize the initiative there. And I think whoever the opposition were, it's just good to be home. And perhaps Munster, knowing the threat they possess as well, the history behind these sort of clashes we've got with them, adds up to a heady mix.
And obviously they had a bit of a scratchy win against Treviso last weekend. I'm assuming you expect an improved Munster side coming here on the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. They haven't lost an overload of players to World Cup commitments really. The strength of their side, still a lot of durable players around that pack, a real physical edge to them. So we're going to have to certainly go up a fair few notches there in terms of what we put on the park. But also, there's a little bit of firepower there. They played a good bit of rugby as well, a little bit different across the summer as well. Someone like Tyler Blyandell available, Keatley moves well with the ball, and a good couple of youngsters like Scanlon and Johnson coming into the middle, and someone like Conway is really exciting this summer. There's regardless of perhaps 2 or 3 of those key players being away from them, they're pretty consistent with what they've got.
I know it's only one game, but there's no cliches, and it's important to start the season well. How important is it to bounce back this weekend and beat Munster, because you don't want to be playing catch-up from this early on in the season?
No, we've learned from history where after we won the league we had a bad run at the start, and it was really difficult to catch up after that. We couldn't do so with the form of other sides. Last couple of years we've been a bit more consistent and you get points on the board, so clearly that's a factor this weekend against a side who's going to be close to the top as the season goes on. But for us, regardless of opposition, it is about building momentum now early season. And so we've got to put a performance together, and we can't go back to back with what we produced last week. And to be fair, up to now in our tenure, they've tended to respond to any sticky days of the office with a good reaction. I'd expect that doubly so this weekend.
And over the past few seasons, Liberty has been a bit of a fortress, I suppose, that determined to win the first game of the season in front of your home fans. Yeah,
definitely. We gave them an unbeaten season in the league last year, and we've got immense pride in playing at our home stadium in front of those fans. But hopefully we've got immense pride amongst the group and what we represent as well, and players who've gone before, such as a Jerry Collins type figure who's been a warrior there. We want a few of these guys to step up and not just becoming macho players. I always want to create thinking players who are smart in what they do, but we certainly need a little bit of mungle to what we do as well in our first home appearance.
And you mentioned there'll be a tribute to Jerry Collins on Sunday. What exactly will be done during the game or before the game?
A minute's silence to what I know, and there'll be a bucket collection. I'm not sure, Pete, if you can add anything to what Nick has said.
Yeah, there's also going to be the retiring the jersey, M6 jersey for the match. Obviously, the flag bearers will have JC6 jerseys on, what have you as well.
There's real sentiment behind that. Genuinely, I speak for someone like Steve Tandy who played with him. I know there's a lot of younger players around this group, but he left a legacy. A lot of the young players remember when they were at the academy, and we want to put a performance on that can actually represent what he always put together in the shirt and as a human.
I can imagine. If we can come back to Rees, have you actually spoken to Rees since the injury?
I've shared messages with him just via text, but not one-to-one.
Obviously, you can't say too much obviously about the extent of the injury, but just the protocol now, because he signed a dual contract, how will the rehab work? Will he do all his rehab with the Ospreys with you, or will he do half and half with Wales? How will that work?
I'm not sure, probably half and half. We'll wait on the Welsh Rugby Union. At the moment he's their player, they'll have to go through their release, and our medical team will work closely with them in terms of what comes next. We'll support him 100%, and our medical team historically have always done their damnedest by Rees and other players in that situation, but obviously injured within the camp first and foremost. We'll just take it from the WRU's medical team from there.
Heartbreak for Rees, obviously, but Eli Walker has been called up because of Lee Halfpenny's injury. We must be delighted for him in a way, but also you're going to lose a very good winger for the next 2 months.
Yeah, disappointed for Lee as well. Don't forget, there's a quality player there who's put so much into the jersey, and again on the cusp of a World Cup is just terrible news really. But obviously seeing Eli get his cap was a high, and missing out then a couple of weeks later on selection was a little bit of a blow for him. And we were looking forward to welcoming him back, but again he goes without blame. We're really chuffed for him. Obviously we've seen his injury setbacks over the years. You're seeing guys come back stronger and tougher around the things they do. You've seen Rees in the past, which he'll certainly do again. Ashley and Eli has obviously had a little bounce of luck here, but good on him, and just hope he goes well.
If you've any boys coming back, obviously suggesting Ryan Barrington and Ryan here might be close to the comeback in the next couple of weeks. Intentions?
Ryan started to join some team training now, so the run of fixtures may help in that there's the odd gap around some of the Guinness games, and Ryan Bev's maybe slightly off. He's obviously not in the group today, but he's doing all the units and picking up things there, and obviously good players add to the depth of the squad where we are a little bit stretched perhaps.